Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Mafia and Gangsters video. Once again, I'm continuing the wonderful book Super Mafia, Organized Crime Threatens America by Jonathan Harris, this time continuing Chapter 6, Part 2 of this series. This one will actually end this chapter, and then we'll move on to the next chapter in the next video. This one is the chapter that's titled No Business Like Mafia Business, once again delving into the many intricate ways that the mafia has their hands entrenched when it comes to making money, whether it's legitimate or most likely illegitimate. So lots of examples to showcase here, and they'll continue with some of the other pages that I'll talk about here in just a moment. But let me know what you guys and gals think about this chapter. Lots of richly detailed info. I'll give my own thoughts and comments towards the end. This is again part 2 of chapter 6. The first subtitle is The Westchester Premier Theater Spectacular. So here's what it says. What has been called the most spectacular bankruptcy fraud case in recent years centered around the Westchester Premier Theater. According to ex-mafioso Jimmy Fratiano, this swindle was launched on 16 acres of swampland in Tarrytown, New York, by two reputed members of New York City's Gambino family, Gregory De Palma and Richard Nerves Fusco. They were active behind the scenes. Federal indictments later called them undisclosed principals. Fronting for them as company president was a well-known stockbroker, Elliot H. Wiseman. So the mobsters built a lavish 1,500-seat showplace on the site. With all the graft and corruption that accompanied its construction, it cost $2.5 million more than the original estimate. Gambino loan sharks secretly provided funds to get things started. Sales of stock to the public brought in hundreds of thousands more. Getting this extremely risky stock approved by the Securities and Exchange Commission is said to have required a good deal of bribery and other under-the-table dealing. To promote the stock, fill all those seats, and reassure their increasingly suspicious creditors, the mobsters spared no expense. They sought out and engaged top stars. Pop singer Diana Ross opened the theaters, drawing an extraordinary fee of $235,000. She was shortly succeeded by the ever-popular and equally expensive Frank Sinatra. Meanwhile, one of the main purposes behind the whole operation was being achieved on the sly. Fratiano, who became one of the chief witnesses against the swindlers, says they were skimming off every possible dollar. He said from the cash concessions, the restaurants, bars, parking, t-shirts, and souvenirs, selling comp tickets, tickets supposedly given free to selected guests, scalping their own tickets, i.e. selling these at outlandishly inflated prices, selling tickets for 61 permanent seats and 136 folding chairs that were not on the theater's seating chart. With this kind of management operating on the basis of a massive issue of fraudulent stock, the next step was not long delayed. The theater went into bankruptcy. Stockholders lost nearly $2 million. The theater's other creditors lost more than $9 million. Federal investigators were brought in. They turned up sufficient evidence to charge Wiseman, De Palma, Fusco, and others with racketeering, stock and bankruptcy fraud, and obstructing justice. A first trial ended in a mistrial, but then De Palma and Fusco then decided to plead guilty to the fraud charges. Wiseman was convicted in a second trial on all counts. All three went to prison. The theater never reopened. And then the next subtitle is called The Securities Racket. The stock market is the place where the wheels of the nation's commerce and industry are greased with cash. Undermine confidence in the stocks and bonds traded here, and you undermine the American economic system. That is precisely what the mafia has been doing over the past 2 decades. Stock thefts began to get serious in the late 1960s. Between 1967 and 1973, they amounted from $8.5 million to over $200 million. Today's total may be twice as large. Simple carelessness and inefficiency in the brokerage houses made a lot of it possible. There was a tremendous surge in investment by the American public starting in the late 1960s. The brokers couldn't keep up with the flood of paperwork. Stock certificates were loosely handled and then often misplaced. The mob sniffed an opportunity and then got busy. It was not hard to find young clerks who could be pressured to cooperate with a little stealing. Gambling debts, loan shark involvements, drug or drinking problems, an outside in for big bucks, or just plain threats were all enough. Senate hearings in the early 1970s turned up one alleged mafioso named Carmine Lombardizzo, who was said to be running a whole string of such unfortunates. According to testimony given at the hearings, it was said, if he said, go get my XYZ, they darn well went in and got it because they were afraid of losing their lives. Stolen securities can be converted into profit in a number of ways. They are often resold to legitimate customers through brokers, picked for their willingness to handle stocks without checking too closely on their sources. The mobsters may take the stocks to banks, where they can be used as collateral for loans that will then never be repaid. The stocks may be sold abroad, with the profits deposited in secret mafia bank accounts overseas, and sometimes they are placed in insurance company portfolios, either in the United States or elsewhere. Next theme is called the most dangerous business, toxic waste. Now, for many years, the mafia has had a virtual stranglehold on the garbage disposal industry in several parts of the country. The means by which the mob accomplished this were simple and brutal. They included threats, extortion, beatings, pistol whippings, and the burning of garbage trucks belonging to local trash haulers who resisted the mob takeover. In the gang garage or garbage wars in New York and New Jersey alone, there have been 14 killings since 1975, all of them unsolved. Newsday, the Long Island newspaper, carried out a thorough investigation in 1978. It concluded, the patterns of corruption in the industry have held firm for more than 20 years. 5 years later, a grand jury probe showed the same persistent patterns of coercion, bid rigging, and payoffs to local politician officials. The newspaper recommended a government takeover as the only practical solution. In recent years, the mob has moved into a closely related and potentially more lucrative field, the disposal of hazardous toxic wastes. The result is a massive new threat to public health and safety. Toxic or poisonous wastes are produced in enormous quantities by a wide range of industrial and chemical companies. The total for the entire country is currently estimated at about 250 million tons a year. Law enforcement officials believe that nearly half of it is being disposed of illegally. Some of these wastes are potentially explosive or inflammable. Others are carcinogenic. That is, they may cause cancer in individuals coming into contact with them or being exposed to their fumes. When these substances are simply dumped into the environment without first being properly treated, they cause lasting, pervasive pollution. Some affected areas have seen their sources of drinking water so badly contaminated that they have had to purchase their water elsewhere. Where mob control companies obtain the contracts for the disposal of these materials, they use a variety of methods for getting rid of them as easily and cheaply as possible. In some cases, the poisonous waste is flushed into municipal or suburban sewer systems. It may be mixed with garbage or dumped into landfills. Warehouses have been crammed with it and then abandoned. It has been buried in unmarked pits, and in a unique twist only recently discovered by police investigators, toxic liquids have been mixed into heating oil and then sold to customers who innocently but riskily burn it into their homes or businesses. The profits in toxic waste disposal are tremendous. In one recent case, an alleged mob-influenced company, Duane Marine Chemical Company of Perth Amboy, New Jersey, was subcontracted to dispose of dangerous waste from the Ford Motor Company in Edison and Mahwah. Duane Marine had received the first state license ever issued for the safe processing and disposal of such materials. Actually, it lacked adequate facilities designed for this purpose. According to an ex-mobster turned government informant, the Ford company paid Duane Marine $50 to $150 a cubic yard. Part of the Ford waste in solid form was simply mixed with non-toxic garbage and then carted to a nearby landfill. Liquid waste in 55-gallon drums were then rolled off the company's dock into a river. The cost to Duane Marine was 50 cents a cubic yard. In Pennsylvania, the mob may have used the scenic acreage of a popular resort in the picturesque Poconos as a dumping ground. This revelation came from William A. Carrasino, former head of waste disposal company who was ousted from his job at the point of a gun. He told state authorities that the gangsters who took over his company had buried some 500 drums of toxic waste there every day during a 3-month period in late 1970s. One of the potential dangers in the mob's careless handling of these materials was demonstrated in the spring of 1980. It happened in Carrasino's former company, the Chemical Control Corporation of Elizabeth, New Jersey. Large quantities of waste have been allowed to pile up in and around its warehouses without the slightest attention paid to their lethal contents. There was an earth-shaking explosion. The resulting fire burned out of control for several days. The entire area, which is partly residential, was endangered. Hundreds had to be evacuated. The mob's recklessness ended up costing New Jersey taxpayers millions of dollars. Next one is called Pizza with Cheese and Tasty Profits. Considering the mafia's ethnic makeup, no businesses would seem more natural targets for infiltration than the pizza and mozzarella cheese businesses. Takeovers have been epidemic in this field. The Pennsylvania Crime Commission recently completed a 2-year study. It concluded that there exists a nationwide web of underworld control extending from manufacturers of mozzarella cheese through distributors to corner pizza shops. The mafia's special interest in these enterprises is not solely due to its ethnic heritage. The pizza trade is very largely a cash business. This means plenty of chances for skimming. In Pennsylvania alone, the yearly skim is estimated at $25 million. Antonio Stabile, owner of a prosperous Italian delight pizzeria in a Pennsylvania small town, is said to have skimmed $1 million in 6 years. According to the Pennsylvania Crime Commission, he apparently raked off no less than $8,000 a week from his daily receipts. The local bank seems to have thought nothing of exchanging the small bills that Stabile brought in for more convenient large ones, even though he never deposited them. Stabile skipped the country in 1979, a step or two ahead of the authorities. The biggie in the Italian cheese business is the Grande Cheese Company of Brownsville, Wisconsin. Its story tells a lot about inter-mob relations. The company was founded in 1941 by alleged Chicago mobsters associated with the notorious Al Capone. Fighting broke out amongst them, and the company nearly went out of business. As Joe Bonanno tells the story in his 1983 autobiography, he was then invited to invest in Grande Cheese by a friend. This man, a successful wholesale food distributor, wanted to buy the company but was afraid of trouble with the Chicago mob. And so to please him, Bonanno bought stock in Grande, and after that, the company enjoyed peaceful relations. It was understood by the Chicago people that Grande was to be left alone. Today, Grande is a $35 million a year enterprise. It happens to make an excellent product, which has been described by an official of a rival company as the Rolls-Royce of mozzarella cheese. Mafia business managers make sure that there are enough outlets for their products to ensure steady trade for their distributors. Mob funds are available on relatively easy terms as startup loans for aspiring pizza shop owners. The one basic requirement, of course, is that they buy all their supplies from mob sources. Mob-run pizzerias sometimes serve as fronts for more sinister activities. According to testimony given before a recent Senate hearing, New York City's Gambino family was running a string of these shops in southern New Jersey. They were importing illegal aliens from Sicily and using this cheap labor in the pizza shop. Some of these people were later inducted into the Gambino family as members. Another source has described the conditions under which the illegal immigrants worked as slave labor conditions. The Senate committee also heard testimony that the Gambino-run pizza parlors were a front for international drug trafficking. A classic case of mob takeover is described in a report by Deputy U.S. Attorney General Philip B. Hyman. The target company was the Rogersville Cheese Factory in Rosendale, Wisconsin. With annual gross revenues of $6 million, it was a leading manufacturer and nationwide distributor of Italian cheese products. The company ran into financial trouble in 1972 when it started having difficulty collecting payments from some of its East Coast customers. Two reputed capos in the Detroit Mafia family, Raphael Quasinero and Peter Vitali sent word that they could help. The company accepted the offer. The two mafiosi did get the bills paid. According to Heyman, they then squeezed Rogersville by arranging to have the customers buy larger quantities of cheese and then delay payment. And so when the owners came back for more help, they were told the price of assistance would be 50% of Rogersville's stock. Now, the outcome of this cozy arrangement was that Quasinero and Vitali received monthly payments totaling $270,000 from 1972 to 1979. At one point, they dreamed up some phony accusations and terrorized one of the owners, warning him that he'd be lucky if his legs weren't broken. The victim turned over all of his stock in the company. And so arrested in 1980 and confronted with overwhelming evidence, the two hoods pleaded guilty. Then that's it. That's everything associated with this chapter. Chapter 6, No Business Like Mafia Business, Part 2. Once again from the book, Super Mafia, Organized Crime Threatens America. So let's go ahead and let's talk about that here. Lots of sinister stuff, right, that this ending part of the chapter highlights. And you know how the movies romanticize the mafia, how they showcase as them sometimes trying to do good for their neighborhood, trying to be good citizens, just blatantly just trying to run a good business, if you will, from what they're doing. But this chapter highlights many of the ways that they did so, but in very, very bad manner. Some of them outright evil. Like, for example, starting from the lighter ones, the area that they were doing involving that theater, how apparently they pretty much stole or basically ripped off all the creditors, all the stockholders, everyone there that was investing within that theater. They even presented some of their own money to help get it started, but at the same time skimming a lot of the money elsewhere afterward, ultimately leading in that company going bankrupt and then leaving everyone without money afterwards. But where it gets really, really bad was associated with the toxic waste business. At that point, there's absolutely no excuse, none at all. The idea that they could start businesses that deal with toxic waste, get the contracts, obviously there's a lot of bribing involved, and then whenever they start doing that work, basically cut corners at every single avenue to the point where they're just literally dumping this waste in neighborhoods and leaving it as is. I mean, this is the kind of stuff, as the chapter highlights, where it can create really bad situations for people, if not the cancer coming from nearby contact of these materials. It's the notion that things will literally explode, like having this stuff, this toxic waste in a warehouse, as the chapter highlighted, having it there, having it collected, and then at one point exploding, contaminating the whole area, hundreds of people having to be evacuated. Luckily, it looked like nobody passed away from it, but still, everyone there was impacted, all because the mafia was greedily cutting corners left and right, to the point where they were being paid $50 to $150 by that company a cubic yard to take care of the toxic waste, and the work they were doing was only 5 cents a cubic yard. I mean, talk about insanity, right? There's absolutely no excuse when it involves this type of greed and the evil acts associated with it. And then the chapter ended by them, the mafia, showcasing how they can control restaurants, how they can control even some of the food associated with the restaurants. All in all, it's an interesting chapter highlighting all the many ways that the mafia entrenches themselves within various sectors and then allows themselves, for lack of a better term, to rip people off. And they can get away with it or they don't. Some of the portions of the chapter highlighted several of the people essentially going to jail afterwards. So bad stuff all around. Again, quite a contrast compared to how the movies tend to romanticize the mafia compared to what you have here. So anyways, let me know what you guys and gals think about this chapter. All right, everyone. Thanks again as always. Take care.